I will be reading from this book, Parallel Letters, Параллельное письмо. It's a book in two languages, my principal literary languages, Russian and English. It was published not too long ago by an amazing new publishing house, Sandermoen Publishing, which is based in Switzerland. And behind it is a fellow emigre from the former Soviet Union, whose name is Anna Sandermoen, and whose vision it is to create books in two languages, bilingual books, with Russian on one side of the book, and I'll show you what it looks like, and with other languages, English or Spanish or French or German. And the idea here is that the children of diaspora, the children of exile, really live between languages, and so more the reason to give them books in which their parents speak to them and in which they speak to the world. So in my case, this is English and Russian. I want to explain that this is not a traditional book with parallel original and translation. There is no original or translation in this book, and it reflects my path, which goes back to the mid 1980s when I was starting out as a young poet in Moscow, then through the year 1987 when my parents and I, former reviewsniks, finally emigrated and came to the United States, and I slowly transitioned over the past 40 years. It's been quite a path and quite a series of creative accommodations. First, continuing to write poetry in Russian, yet writing prose, fiction, and nonfiction in English, translating and self-translating, collaborating with other translators, eventually writing both poetry and fiction in Russian, and finally, and of course, continuing to write in English and publish in English. And finally, during COVID, I embraced a new method, which has been the method which I use in writing. It's called parallel writing. And the idea here, like I said, is that there is neither original nor translation. So more or less, what I do is I set out to write a text, be it a poem or a work of fiction, nonfiction. I write it sometimes first in Russian, sometimes first in English, and then I set it aside and I sit down and I recreate a parallel version. However, this is not a translation. And if you compare the texts, you will discover that there is no equivalency, only a parallel relationship of sorts, which is how I envision my own life as an expatriate, as an emigre, a life between languages, but also between pages of history. And of course, the challenge for those of us who came from the former Soviet Union, particularly Jews from the former Soviet Union, is that many of those pages of history have been erased, deleted. And so our lives are between pages of deleted past very often, or self-deleted past, and pages of the present and future, which is still unfolding very often in an adopted language, like in my case in English. So that's more or less the method. And with that in mind, let me read a few poems from Parallel Letters. Thematically, the book is focused on several aspects of my past, present, and perhaps future as well. So my Jewish Soviet past and disentangling from this, particularly the totalitarian Soviet past. Wars, war against Ukraine, Russia's invasion. I have roots in Ukraine, and I very strongly identify with Ukraine as a victim of aggression. Of course, the war in Israel and against Israel, and today's events particularly emphasize how much the war in Ukraine, the war against Ukraine, and the war in Israel, the war against Israel, are closely connected, perhaps being fronts of the same war against freedom. And finally, questions of anti-Semitism, and particularly how those of us whose craft is language, whose craft is writing, and who are Jewish authors feel increasingly antagonized, increasingly unwelcome in many literary spaces. So that's what the book is about. I will begin with a poem about Israel. It's called Artist's Quarter in Old Jaffa. And I should explain that, like so many Jewish families from the former Russian Empire, and of course, the Russian Empire included present-day Baltics, Belarus, Ukraine, parts of Greater Poland, Bessarabia. And in the 1920s, so many Jewish families were split apart because some members of the families made Aliyah, went to mandatory Palestine to build the future state of Israel, and others stayed behind. And that was the case of my family. And so my late father, David Shrayer Petrov, who was a writer, my main teacher in literature, who was a refusnik activist and a doctor. He was born in Leningrad in 1936. However, his first cousin, whose name is also David, was born in 1938 in mandatory Palestine. So families were connected, yet living parallel lives. And this cousin, David Shrayer, in Israel, the family Hebraized its name from Shrayer to Sharir. It's a very small substitution. And David Shrayer, my father's cousin, is a visual artist and a set designer. For many years, he lived in Old Jaffa in the Artist's Quarter. So that's what's behind this poem. Artist's Quarter in Old Jaffa. The frowned forehead of Kikar Gdumim, a stoneware door sign, Shar Rear. This used to be the home of our cousins. Such were the rules of that translingual game. In Israel, they Hebraized our name. Here lived the artist and his family, the new owners, a Jewish lady from Germany, and her husband, destroyed the family abode of harmony to build their own retirement home. From here, one can see St. Nicholas Monastery, the Nunciature, the Al-Bahar Mosque, where fishermen's wives prayed for their husbands, and also a majestic restaurant, Aladdin. Below, warehouses and fishing boats, and further down, beaches, promenade, hotels, volleyballs, submachine guns, hips, lips, and heels, the joys and torments of every Jewish day imprinted on the sky of Tel Aviv. And now I will read the parallel Russian language version to give you a taste of how this works in both languages. Квартал художников в Яффо. Надбровье, улицы, Кикар, Гдумим. Табличка глинобитная, Шарир. Шарирами здесь стали Шраера. Такая межязычная игра. Жил художник и его семья. Теперь ремонт, цементная возня. Купили дом, разрушили обитель. Муз, немецкая еврейка и немецкий муж, чтоб поселиться здесь под старость лет. Отсюда виден монастырь святого странника, вилла папского посланника и ресторан волшебный, амулет. За ним мечеть Аль-Бахр, где жены рыбарей молились за своих мужей. Внизу пакгаузы, рыбацкие шаланды, а дальше пляжи, променад, отели, длани, ланиты, пятки, автоматы, пальмы, груди еврейских будней, радости и муки. Горний Тель-Авив вздымает руки. I'm going to read a love poem. Of course, this is not only a book that is thematically colored with political dimensions, there are also love poems in it. And this love poem is, of course, for my wife Karen, who is my first and greatest reader. It's called A Midsummer Night's Dream. At slumber time, I usually wander across the internet, the everlasting poison. When I come up to the bedroom, you are asleep, and on my pillow, to the right of your head, guarding your peace, lies our miniature silver poodle, Stella. Before hiding myself in your solace, I move her over with my arm and shoulder. At first, our poodle barely stirs, only her fine long curls sparkle in the dark, her phosphorescent head showing black and silver. Then she drinks for a long time from a glistening enamel vessel, and falling into the binding of dreams, I hear sounds of simple-hearted mysticism. At dawn, when all the eastern phoebes are done fainting and the doves done mourning, when in the double harness of the nebulae a chariot rides over the morning horizon, at the boundary of darkness and daybreak, the intersection of life and deathlessness, I really don't want you to awaken. Don't go yet. When else will be together? And I will now read a poem which is titled Piarno, Many Years Hence. I should explain that Piarno is a coastal resort in Western Estonia, often referred to as the summer capital of Estonia. And back in the 1970s, this place became a magnet for Jewish Soviet intelligentsia. Our parents started taking us there to create a special comfort zone, a special environment, so that Jewish kids would not experience intimidation, anti-Semitism, and feel happy. And a lot of my greatest friends and I met there as children, as preteens, and most of us have since left the Soviet Union and live predominantly in Israel and the United States, and we still go back to Piarno in our dreams, but also sometimes have reunions there. And so this poem describes a reunion with two real friends. One of whom is called Maxim, and one of whom is called Katya, and it is happening as Russia is descending in totalitarianism, and as the war in Ukraine is soon to start. So you will see the poem is dotted with references not only to happiness and childhood, but also to war. Piarno, many years hence. My dear Baltic waves have conspired to take me and carry away where peeling park benches are tired of keeping the secrets at bay. Here, charcoal and train station longing embitter the air of the town. The jetties run northward, prolonging the beach and the braided skyline. We guzzled Estonian beer and feasted on local fare, and effortlessly, without ire, I mentioned the Russian warfare. You sound like a frontline reporter, Maxim said to me. That's so plain. Your poems are simpler and shorter. Your essays spell conflict and pain. And Katya was stubbornly silent while stirring the thin ember slice of sunset. She still had her talent for noticing artifice. We knew that this wasn't on purpose. We felt it within our hearts, yet saying those words was hurtful. We are different, different. But how? Our dear Baltic waves left us orphaned, yet brought us the old salt taste of our Soviet childhood. How can we be saved from ourselves? And now I'm going to turn to a poem which is also historically based and also has to do with exile and with living between languages. But this one is a poem about Thomas Mann. As you know, Thomas Mann left Nazi Germany and he was living in the United States, actually on the West Coast in Pacific Palisades. And after the war, he felt a lot of pressure. He wanted to visit Germany. He had a lot of misgivings about it. And it all culminated in 1949 during during Goethe's bicentennial. And what happened was that he was being pressured by the United States not to visit the eastern part of Germany. He wanted to visit both Frankfurt and Weimar. He also wanted to visit his hometown of Lübeck. And this poem is about the visit and what he and his ex-Jewish wife, Katya Mann, might have felt during that time. It's called Last Will and Testament, and I will read it first in Russian and then the English. In Russian, it's called Завещание. Томас Манн возвращается горестно в Любек. У ворот городских рукоплещут юнцы и девицы. Он старик, он по-прежнему немец, он влюбчив, он не знает, куда от стыда подеваться. Катя Ман говорит, милый, тут нам не место, это крошево, даже на смерть не похоже. Все потеряно, в кирхе рыдает невеста, раскурочен орган, на котором играл Букстехуде. Томас Манн отвечает, родная, песок в траве Мюнде, бел, как пепел, и холоден, как неземная усталость. Я Германии верен до гроба, сюда я вернулся, только здесь от меня ничего не осталось. And now the English language parallel version. Last Will and Testament. Thomas Mann has returned to the city of Lübeck. The municipal elders have gathered to welcome him home. He's old, he blushes, he feels like a young German lover, and he doesn't know how to abolish his shame. Katya Mann tells her husband, we don't belong in this country. How eerie this place, how sated with murderous joy. All is lost. At the Kirche, the bride has been wailing since sunrise. Buxtehude's great organ has been vandalized and destroyed. Darling, says Thomas Mann, on the strand of my youth, Trave Munde, sand is weightless like ashes and cold like unearthly embrace. All my life I have been faithful to Germany. Now, what an ending to discover that nothing of mine remains. Thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here with you.